Welcome to this Greg Spaceshed Blues Week. So whether you're a beginner or a more experienced player, this is the place to be. The place to become the blues bass player you've always wanted to be, and to learn how to improvise exciting and authentic sounding blues bass lines, and to hold your own at a blues gig or a blues jam. I'm Greg Hagger, a pro bass player, and for the last 25 years I've been playing blues, and I've also been teaching and helping other bass players to play great blues bass lines that blow people away at blues gigs and blues jams. The skills that you need to play blues is also very transferable to lots of other styles of music, and I've been using those skills for years to play in lots of London's top theatres. I've played in the Royal Albert Hall, I've played in the London Palladium, on TV gigs, and I've also played in lots of the smaller gigging venues like the Troubadour Club in London and the 12 Bar and the 100 Club. As well as playing in London, my bass skills have taken me to many arenas and venues around the world. So some of my favourites being the House of Blues in Shanghai, and most recently I played at the Tokyo Arena. This is the first in a series of 3 videos in this Blues Week, and I'll be passing on my knowledge and teaching you how to play sensitive, explosive and authentic blues bass lines. If you're someone who doesn't know how to play or improvise blues bass lines, then I understand exactly how you feel, because I wasn't always able to play proper blues bass lines, and I certainly didn't always understand the form and the structure of blues songs. Picture me as a 14-year-old. I could barely play the bass, I didn't really have any technique, I didn't understand blues progressions, but one thing is I really wanted to become a rock star. At that time I really struggled with what to play outside the most basic blues riffs. I didn't really understand keys, turnarounds, chord progressions, I didn't understand the structure of songs, I couldn't even read music. All I could really do was copy quite badly some blues bass lines that I was hearing on records. But I wanted to be able to play exciting blues bass lines, and I wanted to understand how blues songs were constructed. But most importantly of all, I just wanted to get in a band and play gigs. So what did I do? Well, with the few pennies that I had, I kind of went and bought some records. I sneaked into the back of jam nights and blues gigs that I could find locally. I went through my dad's collection and pulled out, he had a lot of kind of British blues like Cream, and he had some Jimi Hendrix as well. I kind of got that and just threw myself into listening to all these iconic blues songs and trying to kind of pull the secrets out of them. I also started really studying the history of blues, and I still continue doing that nowadays. I find it absolutely fascinating. Throughout this process I found some formulas that really unlocked the blues for me and gave me a framework that I could improvise my blues bass lines from that would sound great every time and work every time. Since those early days I've played many gigs. I've been in more blues bands than I can remember. I've made recordings, and I feel that I've really got to the essence of what blues bass playing is all about. The goal of this Blues Week is to show you the critical things that you need to become an exciting blues bass player that people want in their band and that audiences want to hear. And I'm going to share the formulas that I've discovered and distilled over the years of playing blues. This is how you start learning the knowledge that you need to be able to improvise your own walking lines that sound great over any blues tune. When you have this confidence with your blues bass playing, you can go and nail your first blues night or gig. Imagine unzipping your bass case, walking into the lights onto the stage, a singer shouts a blues tune at you, the drummer gives you a beat, you come in, and then before you know it you've played the whole tune and you're walking off stage to cheering of the audience. This can become a reality for you, and who doesn't want to be up there on stage, laying down a solid bass line and jamming with other musicians? So let's dig in now. In this video we're going to look at how blues songs are constructed, especially looking at the 12-bar blues progression, because this is the backbone of the most iconic blues songs and it's stood the test of time. Understanding blues progressions is critical for you to know, as they form the cornerstone to all blues. The most important thing that you need to know about blues form is the 12-bar blues progression. Now, when blues first kind of came on the scene in sort of 1890, it was generally based on one chord. It was kind of called modal blues, and it was more about the melody and very much closer to kind of the African roots of blues. And then Western harmony and chords started to become incorporated into this style, and the 12-bar blues progression evolved. Blues then really became a fusion of kind of African and Western influences. Now for the 12-bar blues sequence, there are just 3 chords that you need to know: chord 1, chord 4 and chord 5. If we write these chords using the Roman numeral system, they look like this, but really that's just another way of writing chords 1, 4 and 5. And to learn where these chords are, you just need to know 2 fretboard shapes. So in the key of C, this is where chord 4 and 5 are above the root note C. And this is where chords 4 and 5 are if we play them below the root note C. Really get these 2 shapes in your head as they form the system that you'll use for blues bass lines. We can get these chords 1, 4 and 5 from the major scale. So if we just play a major scale on C and we just count, so C is the root note, chord 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, so that's F, 5, that's G, okay, so 1, 4, 5. Okay, that's how we find our chords, but it's really important that you just remember the fretboard shapes. Listen to this old style guitar track and see if you can hear where the chords are changing. You're probably already familiar with what the 12-bar blues progression sounds like, but this is what it's like written down with Roman numerals. And if we then replace the Roman numerals with the chord names in the key of C, this is what the 12-bar sequence looks like. We can use these 2 fretboard shapes to play the whole 12-bar progression. And remember, you can play the chord 4 and 5 above the root note or below. And that really kind of depends on you, what you feel like playing. In some keys, it's not possible to play below. If we had G, if we start with our root note on G, we've got chord 1, chord 4, chord 5. Okay, so we can't find those below, not on a 4 string anyway. Okay, so it just really depends. You can play 4 and 5 above and below if possible. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to play through the 12-bar progression with a backing track, and I'm just going to play the root notes, and I'm going to hold each note for 4 beats, which is the whole bar. Okay, so watch me do that, and I'm going to use chord 4 and 5 above. So have a listen. If you want to join in, then feel free to do that. Now we can alter this 12-bar sequence to make it more interesting. So a common change is to add what's called the quick 4. And all that means is you just add chord 4 in the second bar. So there's normally a chord 1 there for 4 bars. You've just got chord 1, chord 4, chord 1, chord 1. Okay, and that's called the quick 4 change. So it's really important just remember that name, because if you're at a jam night, someone just might shout with the quick 4 or quick 4 change, so you know exactly what they mean. You play chord 4 in the second bar. So some tunes kind of use like the basic sequence underneath the vocals, and then they change to quick 4 in the solos. There's no hard and fast rule really. You kind of just have to get used to using that and using your ear. You might hear like the guitarist go to chord 4, so the next time round just go to chord 4. The second change we're going to add is we're going to put chord 5 in the last bar. This is kind of sometimes called a dominant ending. It doesn't really matter about the name, but we're going to use chord 5 in the last bar. And sometimes that's part of a bigger turnaround, as it's called, in the last 2 bars. But we'll focus more on turnarounds in the next video lesson. So if we put both of these new chord changes in the 12-bar sequence, we now get this progression. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to play this new progression to a backing track, and instead of just using root notes for 4 beats, I'm going to use root notes, but I'm going to just use the shuffle feel, which is this. These are shuffle 8 notes. If they were straight, they would be like this. But if you listen to the drum beat from the backing track, you kind of need shuffle 8th notes to really work with that rhythm. So you can count through that 1, 2, 3, 4, and then move on to the next bar. Okay, so this would be 1, 2, 3, 4. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a mixture of playing chord 4 and 5 above and below. So, you know, you can always mix where you play the position of these chords within a bass line. Okay, so if you listen to me do that and watch me do that, afterwards what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave the backing track running for a chorus and you can try it yourself. So that's the main form of blues songs. The 12-bar blues sequence is by far the most popular. So you really need to get that whole sequence in your head. Make sure you know it and you can memorise it, because it'll be a given that you know this if you turn up at a blues jam night. Now the 12-bar progression is sometimes changed for different kind of blues songs. Like for example, Born Under a Bad Sign just has chord 1 for the first 8 bars and then it goes into those last usual 4th bars. And The Thrill Is Gone, that kind of uses chord 6 and then 5 in bars 9 and 10. So you will get these different chords that come in, but it's just a matter of gradually learning those as you learn these blues standards. You'll also find 8-bar blues and 16-bar blues. Now these aren't as popular. The 8-bar blues is probably the next most popular one, but they both just use different combinations of chords 1, 4 and 5. So if you know where those chords are on the bass, then you can play these different progressions. So the 8-bar blues, you'll find lots of different kind of types of progressions within that 8-bar blues. So for example, you might see 4 bars of chord 1 and then 4, 5, 1, 5. Or another common one is chord 1, chord 4, chord 4, chord 1, chord 5, chord 1, chord 5. But don't worry about these combinations, because when you start to learn these songs, as I said, you just need to use these positions to play them. Now the 16-bar blues will often just have another 4 bars of chord 1 tagged on the beginning or at the end of the sequence. There are what I call song-based blues as well, and these kind of just have the flavour of blues, but they have different progressions, so you'll come across those too. But for now, what I suggest you do is become very familiar with the 12-bar sequence in C, learn the fretboard positions and learn the progression, and then transpose it to different keys. So common blues keys would be like E, A, D, G. Try those 4 different keys first of all. So it's just a matter of taking those shapes to starting on a different root note around the bass. So kind of if you wanted to start on A, you could start here, chord 1, chord 4, chord 5. Okay, G, chord 1, chord 4, chord 5. Okay, well, so I say D, chord chord 1, chord 4, chord 5, and you can also go below on D, chord 1, chord 4, chord 5. Okay, and E, you can start using the open strings, but we'll look at that more. So it's just important that you kind of really get it comfortable in C and then try these different keys. Now, one important thing to note here, and I hope I've demonstrated that so far in this video, is you don't have to be an advanced player or even an intermediate player to play blues. Even if you've got a limited technique, with the correct information, you'll still be able to construct and play great authentic sounding blues bass lines. But there's more to this that you need to know about. In the next video, I'm going to show you how you can play bass over these progressions. I'm going to show you how you can use the blues scale to construct walking lines and how you can create different blues riffs. With this knowledge, you'll be able to create your own hard-hitting blues bass lines. I'm also going to show you some different blues turnarounds that you play kind of at the end of the 12-bar sequence, and you need to know these turnarounds so you don't kind of get caught short when you're playing with different blues musicians. But right now I want to find out a bit more about you. What does being able to play exciting and authentic blues bass lines mean to you?